I'm Anya. I'm doing a Masters of Addiction at King's College London, and I did my undergraduate at the University of Bristol in psychology. I'm currently working with drug science as an honorary research assistant.
Anya, you have an Instagram page called Addiction with Anya, where you share really candid and helpful information about substances. What is addiction?
So addiction, it's obviously very complex, very multifaceted, but the sort of four pillars that constitute an addiction. Number one, tolerance. So that just means needing to take more of the drug to reach that same level of high and enjoyment as you usually would. Two, compulsion. So you feel this lack of control and you can't say no to something when actually you know that's not the right thing for you. Number three, dependence. So, you sometimes you feel like you sort of can't go a night without it. Or if you're going to a specific event, for example, a club, you feel like drinking's just not enough and you do have to have that extra line of Coke or Ket to make you feel like, okay, I'm at that level of enjoyment where I can have fun. And finally, withdrawal. So the next day you might feel really anxious, or you might get sort of a come down.
And what causes addiction?
So it's quite a complex question, and people have a lot of different reasons why they start using drugs and get addicted. There are a lot of theories. There's sort of the learning theory, the disease model, and the choice model. And often research drills into one and policies really drill into one. But actually, it's sort of a mix of all of them, in the same sense that no two snowflake is the same. That's very much the case for addiction, where often someone might have an alcohol use disorder or a cocaine use disorder, but the reasons why someone actually initiated that drug use are often always very different and based on, their past experiences, traumatic experiences from childhood, predispositions, economic factors. It's a very varied field, incredibly difficult to nail down sometimes.
Is it the substance themselves that makes them addictive, or is it to do with the people that take these drugs?
It's a mixture of both. With something like cocaine, because you go up so quickly and down so quickly, you're sort of left wanting more. And I've seen quite a lot of people, as soon as they hit that come down aspect of it, it's like, oh, well, I can just do another bump and I'll get right back up there. But also definitely to do with the person, because, if someone has come out of a really traumatic childhood and they sort of want to escape from reality for a little bit and be put in a different headspace, sometimes using that drug is a way in which they exit their reality and can transform themselves into some kind of different experience where they don't have to think about the things that would usually make them really upset.
Yeah, let's pick up on that, this idea of addiction and trauma. What's the relationship between those two things?
Trauma is a huge thing where a lot of Gabor Mate's research, who's quite a big name in the field, a key quote from him says, it's not why the addiction, it's why the pain. And actually a lot of research has been done to support that, where, if we look at the rat park experiments, there's this case of if you place a rat in a cage with absolutely nothing, they'll be more likely to consume the drug, as opposed to, when they're in quite a nurtured cage where, they have things to do, they have other rats with them, they have a spinning wheel and things like that. So it's really this idea of actually, if you're around people who are very supportive and, you have a good environment around you, you partake in a healthy lifestyle, then of course you're probably going to be less likely to develop an addiction.
And why do you think it's so important for people who might be struggling with dealing with trauma or pain in their life to get help before they end up addicted potentially to a substance?
It's really important to know that a lot of the time addiction is reversible, especially when you're young. Your brain is very much still in the developing phases. The sooner you get help, the better it will be long term for your brain, for your body, just for your general health. It will benefit you. But also it's just not sustainable to go on like that. And whilst at the time you may feel that, this is the best way for me to deal with my problems, at the end of the day, you have to look at it from a very pragmatic point of view. The more you use, the more your tolerance is going to increase. If you're using something like cocaine, that's going to get really expensive to have to keep buying more and more. But also you push any of your friends, your loved ones away. And it's just really, really important to know that recovery is possible and everything is reversible from what research has been showing, even with chronic cocaine use. So it's really important to know that.
And how is addiction often treated?
So there are a lot of different ways, depending on sort of what drug someone's using and how severe and advanced their addiction is. It often depends on the sort of set of policies that a country prescribes. So for example, in America, it's very disease model orientated. So there's a very strong medicated system of treatment there. But in the UK, a lot of CBT is used, depending on the person, depending on the drug they're using, depending on how advanced that addiction is. It will obviously be different for every single person. But I think the most important thing is just simply talking to someone, because when you're addicted to something, you're sort of in this negative cycle of thinking where, suddenly you get a craving. You feel like you have to act on that craving, and subsequently you find yourself just using the drug. And I think breaking down those thought processes through actually talking to someone, especially a therapist who can understand where you're coming from and knows sort of what to say and how to action that, is really, really important in untangling that negative pattern and actually then instilling positive coping mechanisms. Things like mutual aid groups, AA meetings, NA meetings are quite useful for some people. Again, it's just finding that social connection, because often when you are so addicted to something, you feel so stigmatized that it's so difficult to then get help, because you're like, oh no, everyone's going to look at me like I'm a failure type thing.
Why is there this stigma associated with addiction?
If you frame addiction as a crime, then suddenly you're prescribing this thought that, okay, everyone who does drugs are bad people. And obviously, if you're perceived as a bad person, then the terminology goes with that. So things like addict, junkie, dirty, people say I got clean. It's like, oh, does that mean that you were dirty in the first place? And it's obviously really upsetting to see how kind of framing addiction as a crime trickles down into public terminology and language. And sadly, it does just perpetuate the issue of stigmatization.
So where should somebody go if they are struggling with addiction to substances?
So I think if it's something that's quite advanced, absolutely go to your local drug service. But if you're sort of a bit anxious and you haven't spoken to anyone about it, definitely get on a sort of helpline. I know that Release have a helpline. So definitely worth calling any of those if you sort of want to speak about it anonymously for the first time. But otherwise, absolutely go to your friends and family, do some research yourself. I'd recommend looking at Drug Science, Release, this series of episodes, absolutely. And, hopefully in time, people can feel like they can go to their teachers and discuss it.